Welcome to another episode of Inside the Mavs. Kevin Gray, Mavs pre and post game host on 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me here on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcast. Inside the Mavs is the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1. Mavs basketball here on this episode. I'm so excited to be joined by my guest today. Does terrific work for the Dallas Mavericks, digital content manager, controls Studio 41, Mavs Studio 41. You can catch him every single home game, giving you the news and notes and facts to get you ready for Mavs basketball at the AAC. But he's also a good friend of mine. He is, of course, Bobby Karalla. Bobby, what's going on?
Oh, not much, man. How are you, Kevin?
Doing well. I appreciate you hanging out with me for a little bit here on the show as we talk a little Mavs basketball. Before we get into anything specific, give me your 30,000-foot view of this team at 22-36, same record through 38 games as it was a year ago this time. What is your collective view of this team right now as we sit 38 games in?
Well, I think if we would have just recorded this podcast when you asked me if I wanted to come on, which was like yesterday afternoon. Oh, man, it might the whole conversation might be a little different. But I think despite what happened against Grizzlies and despite all of this, I guess the tumult that just comes with all of these injuries, I think the one thing that is for certain about this team, Luka is really good, Kyrie's really good, and Derek Lively is really good. Coming into this season, the first two were kind of givens, and everyone was kind of looking around like, okay, is anybody else? Is Grant Williams the third best player? Like, is it going to be Josh Green somehow? Or is like Jaden Hardy maybe going to be the guy? Like Tim Hardaway Jr., of course. No, now it's Derek Lively. And so, moving forward, whether that's as we approach the trade deadline or the offseason, like from a team building perspective, and also just from the standpoint of like, how do we get through the rest of the season? And if you're trying to make a playoff push, like, that you have those three cornerstones. That if you get to April 14th and you're in the top 6 or the top 10, and those three guys are healthy, you believe that you have a chance. You have a chance to do something, to win a series, to win 2 series, to win the whole dang thing, whatever the case is. But, there are those three guys that you can feel really, really good about. And then there's other players like Dante Exum and Derrick Jones Jr. in particular that you can feel pretty dang good about. And then Tim Hardaway Jr. too, I feel like, he's kind of cooled off a little bit, but he still had a pretty good season. And then there are guys like Jaden Hardy, Josh Green, and Grant Williams, who, if between now and the end of the season, they can kind of step it up a little bit, whether it's find their form or rediscover their form or just figure out their role or whatever the case is, then all of a sudden, you have a pretty good top 8, top 8, top 9 in your rotation. So I think the 30,000-foot view is, man, it is really good to finally not have a question mark at center. But there are still other things, gaps to fill and holes to try and fill between now and February, between now and April.
Luka and Kyrie are the givens, as you mentioned. I want to stick on Lively just for a second, because as excited as I am about Derek Lively and the progression that we've seen for him, I don't know about you, but it's really cool that a 19-year-old is having the kind of impact that he is. But it's also kind of terrifying, the dependence of a 19-year-old that this team has upon him, given the skill set that he has with his ability to rebound. We've seen the rim running. The defense is getting better, which we've seen throughout the course of the year so far when he's been on the floor. But to me, that kind of concerns me because, while, Luke and Kyrie are going to do what they do, your third best player, as you mentioned right now, is a 19-year-old rookie who's still figuring it out as he's going on. Does that ultimately concern you, or just give you more optimism that as he continues to get more experience, that will alleviate some of the concern that Mavs fans may have because of the dependence that they have on him already?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like 6 of one and half dozen of the other, because he's already come so far on the defensive end and also just with his touch around the basket. I mean, he's making baby hooks and everything. Like, it's really, really impressive just how much smoother, how much more confident he looks with the ball in his hands now than he did in October and then he did at Duke and all that stuff. So that's really cool. I think the concerning part, if it exists, would be, he's 19 and he like still gets in foul trouble a lot. which is not bad. I mean, even J Kidd, before a recent game, before he got hurt against the Blazers, it's like, look, I would rather him get in foul trouble than play overly cautious to the point where he avoids foul trouble, because I need him to find that line. How far can I push it? How physical can I be? How aggressive can I be? So that I can understand, like, yeah, this is the line that if I cross, I'm going to get called for foul. I need to condition the officials to my game, and I need to condition myself to how they want to call the game and everything. So, he would rather him be really aggressive, but we've seen the drop off that happens to this team, whenever he's out of the lineup. And so if he's out because he's injured, or if he's out because he has 2 fouls 2 minutes into the game, that's really, really bad, especially for the defense. So I think from that perspective, it is a little concerning. And then also just physically, he is not. He's maybe, how about this? He's a 27-year-old mentally, but he's not quite a 27-year-old physically. He needs to fill out a little bit more in order to bang with guys like Jokic and some of these other big hosses that have given the Mavs some problems this season. So that will correct itself in time. I don't believe that will correct itself in the next 3 months. If it does, I'd be amazingly shocked. That would be like historic. So I think those two things are kind of the drawbacks, of relying so much on a rookie. But on the other hand, like, my God, how could you not be excited? Because, for as good, in my opinion, here's some propaganda for you, Kevin. You know how I feel about Dwight Powell. For as good as Dwight Powell's been filling in for Lively these last few games, Lively is still, like, the on-offs are all still so much better whenever he's on the floor. And also there's a serious drop-off between centers 2 and 3 in the rotation, right? Between Dwight and whoever the third big is, whether that's Rashawn Holmes or Maxey before he got hurt, or Markieff Morris if they're playing small, or Grant Williams if they're playing small. Like, the Mavs need both of those guys healthy. They need both of them to be able to combine for basically all 48 minutes right now. And so, they need Lively on the floor as much as possible, despite all of the growing pains that he's still going to experience the rest of the season.
Yeah, because you've seen the highs and the lows with him. At the best, he is a terrific rim runner with some nice touch around the rim, providing some rim protection, shot deterrence, and obviously a guy that's learning how to be better in playing in space. And one of the things that has surprised me about him so far, my man's a decent passer too. You've seen some of the passes that he's made out of short rolls and some of the things that he's done. And that was one thing that took me by surprise, is that you talked about his IQ a little bit. He's a really good passer for someone who's just 19 years old. And I think that, to me, is just another part of his game that surprises a lot of people based on what he was limited at in Duke. I guess based off the role that they were asking him to play there, but now being able to see some more of his expanded game, he's got a chance to do some really nice things in a lot of different areas that I think can really help with the versatility offensively, especially for the Mavs at this point.
Yeah, he's got a really good feel for the game, and that's important because, and this is something that if you've been watching the Mavs for like 7 or 8 years or longer, you've seen develop in Dwight's game. We know the Mavs love spamming this high pick and roll with Luka. Before Luka, it was JJ Barea. Before JJ Barea, it was Jason Kidd. I mean, they've been doing this forever, right? Or Monte Ellis in between there too. The league has kind of changed, though, a little bit, and in the last few years, if you're a big that cannot shoot, and Dwight Powell has always struggled with his 3-point shot. Derek Lively, we'll see if he can develop it. But at this point, he's taking his shots from 5 feet and closer. If they don't respect the threat of your jump shot, they're going to blitz the ball handler like 90% of the time. It doesn't matter if you got Luka and Kyrie on the floor. They're still going to put 2 in the ball handler's face, and they're going to say, hey, center that does not have the skill to knock down a 25-footer, what can you do whenever you have the ball in your hands 18 feet from the rim? And for a really long time, I mean, Dwight really struggled to find those short roll passes. Really, unless your name was like Draymond Green or Andrew Bogut, there just weren't a lot of bigs that were doing that in the league. But in the last couple of years, Dwight's figured it out, and Lively has come into the NBA with that ability. Now, that was something we didn't see a lot at Duke because they just didn't run a lot of high pick and roll. I mean, really, no college team runs a lot of high pick and roll like the way an NBA team would. But I mean, he came in the league with that feel, and that's really, really good for him because, it means if he's got a runway to the rim, he's going to dunk it. If there's a guy between him and the rim, he can find the open shooter, because if you put 2 on Luka or you put 2 on Kyrie, you only have 3 to defend everybody else, and he can find those guys in the corner. And one thing I want to say before I give it back to you, Kevin, I know it looks like there's like a rave going on in my living room right now. It's just like automatic adjustment to the light here. So I just bear with me here. I wish I was partying, but no, I'm just hanging out in my living room.
That's funny that you mentioned that. I didn't even consider it until you actually said something. So it'll be funny when people look at it on the videos like, man, Bobby's having a hell of a good time back there at his in his
Or
studio.
like
Or
I'm
his...
like standing like 6 inches from a flickering fire in my face. No, it's just my laptop.
It's just your laptop. That's no problem at all. So with Luke, and we'll get more into Luka and Kyrie as a tandem because the last few games that we've seen from them combining for 69 points, combining for 60, like they're doing their part offensively based off of what we thought that they were going to. But a couple of the other guys for the supporting cast, if you will, two that have really surprised. We talked about Derek Lively, but Dante Exum and Derrick Jones Jr. have really come in for this team and provided them a lot more than what any of us, I'm sure, expected of them, particularly Derrick Jones Jr., because he was a fringe signing at the end of free agency. And all of a sudden, he finds himself inserted into the starting lineup and has arguably, along with Exum, the two best defenders that they have on this team on the ball. And for Jones, knocking down threes at a rate that he's never really done it at before. He's cooled off a little bit over the last, couple of weeks. But prior to that, he was knocking down threes, defending. We know that he's a former dunk champion, so there's a lot of athleticism there. How surprised have you been at what Derrick Jones Jr. has been able to provide based on what we knew about him coming into this season and how he's really kind of flipped that on its head so far this year?
I've been really surprised with Jones in particular because earlier in his career, he was kind of the 3-and-D guy, but without the three, like he just didn't shoot a lot, whenever he was with the Heat. And then he kind of bounced around for a little bit, went to Portland where it was like everyone kind of let Dame and CJ McCollum do their thing. And then he was in Chicago. And what I was really intrigued by whenever the Mavs signed him was he was really good as a roll man in the pick and roll with Chicago. He was kind of playing like the 4, but they had like Vucevic. Okay, he can be the stretch 5. And so you have all this room underneath. And I thought that's what they were going to do with him. Like I thought it was going to be Derrick Jones and Maxey. Maxey's your floor spacer. Derrick Jones is doing the roll stuff underneath. But he's taken the 3 with confidence. But the element of his game that I did not know really existed, and maybe this is on me for not watching, or maybe he's never been in this situation before, but whenever he attacks closeouts or if there's like a driving lane, he is going to find it. And he's going to get to the rim. And he's got, not only does he have this incredible vertical leap, but he can also hang in the air, bring the ball way back. It's very, very difficult to block that as the big man because you're reacting to what he's doing. So you're usually jumping after he is, but he can stay afloat longer than you can. And he's just going to lay it in over you or draw a foul. And I mean, he was doing that even to like Rudy Gobert. Like he is not afraid of anybody. And he's got the touch to finish. And obviously as a lefty, that's another thing too, because everyone is like so ingrained in their mind, like, guy's right-handed, and then you go up against a lefty and you just forget he's left-handed, and all of a sudden he's dunking it on you, and with Exum, it's kind of the same thing. The Mavs have, whenever they're both healthy and in the lineup and stuff, they can put those two guys on the floor together. And, unlike last season and the year before, whenever there's a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith in one corner and Reggie Bullock in the other, who, they're going to knock down the shot like 40% of the time, 38% of the time or whatever. But if the shot's not there, what are they going to do with it? The off the bounce game wasn't really a huge component of their offensive arsenal. Like even as of 2 or 3 weeks ago, as of Christmas, Derrick Jones had already scored more points as a spot up shooter going to the rim. So not taking the 3, like literally I'm catching it to fake a shot, go to the basket. He'd already scored more points in those situations than Reggie Bullock did all year last year combined for the whole season.
Wow.
And that's no slide on Bullock. It's just those guys were shooters. That's it, But with Jones and with Exum and Josh Green to an extent as well, all of those guys can either take the shot if it's there, and if it's not, they can get past their man and finish at the rim. And that just adds an element of fluidity and dynamicism to this offense that makes it way less predictable, way less stagnant, way less monotonous. And it just makes it more fun too, because those guys can get a touch and do something with the ball as opposed to just like catch it kind of like, oh crap, and then give it right back. Like there's more human movement. There's just more stuff happening, and it makes the Mavs a much more difficult team to guard.
Yeah, and I think for Exum and Jones, particularly for Exum, more confidence in attacking closeouts. And he's also, before he got injured, starting to knock down the three at a little bit higher rate as well, with confidence taking that shot when he had the open opportunities to do so. And I think that was something the Mavs had talked about. Like, look, if Exum's got open opportunities to shoot the three, hey man, go ahead and shoot that thing. You're gonna get a lot of wide open looks playing with Luka and Kyrie, whether you're in the corner or on the wing. Go ahead and take that shot with confidence and knock it down. And I think that started to change for him, and that just adds yet another element to the offense where you can't just stay home on Luka or Kyrie or try to defend them and then get caught in 4-on-3 basketball. Next thing you know, your defense, you're scrambling trying to figure out who do I get, because there's going to be guys knocking down shots, all over the place, which I thought coming into the season we would see at a high level with, okay, Luka, Kyrie, spread the thing out. They can go create for themselves. They can create for others. As long as guys are knocking down shots, which, the Mavericks have done for the most part this year, a top 10 team in terms of knocking down three-pointers, win a lot of games, because how do you stop all of that, especially when trying to Luka and Kyrie at that point?
Yeah, I mean, Luka, Kyrie, and Tim, and I guess maybe Jaden Hardy, depending on how high you were on him at the end of last season. Coming into the year, it's like those are the guys that can create stuff. Everybody else stands still three-point shooter. Like, that was kind of the perception, right? And that the only other element that can change this offense is like a rim running big man that can maybe open something up or attract some weak side defender or whatever, kick it out to the corner. Like, that's it. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very like spreadsheet basketball, right? But they have a lot more ball handling and a lot more just aggression. Maybe not playmaking, but definitely aggression, decisiveness in the offense than they did last year, the year before, even whenever they went to the conference finals. And decisiveness is like such an important thing. That comes from confidence, right? Just like belief in yourself, and also like belief in kind of the system, and like you're not thinking, you're just playing. It's so important because the Mavs get double teamed more than any other team in the NBA by far. Like, it's not even close. Luka gets double teamed a whole lot. We've seen Kyrie get double teamed these last few games as well, quite a bit. And so whenever you're, as the offense, playing 4-on-3 in those situations, you have to act fast. Like, 4-on-3 is easy if you can make a decision quickly. If you wait for 1 second or even half a second, the advantage is gone. And you're probably in an even worse situation than you would have been just playing 5-on-5, because now there's only 12 seconds left in the shot clock. And like, you're dead, probably picked up your dribble on the wing 29 feet from the basket, and Luka's still got two guys on him, and the rim runner is like already under the basket, and you're just like, oh my God, what do I do? You have to go quickly. It feels like way fewer. Now, this is eye test. I actually haven't looked at this in a while, but it feels like a much lower percentage of the Mavs offensive possessions this year have gone down to the final like 5 seconds of the shot clock than last year, where it felt like 1 out of every 10 trips down the floor, like the shot clock is red on the TV screen, and you're like, oh my God, like shoot the dang ball. It feels like this year that's just not the case, because come here, screen, double team, pass, tic-tac-toe, boom, and there's like 14 seconds left of the shot clock, and they're burying an open three. Like, I want more guys that can do that in the offense, and fewer guys that are going to be like, I don't know, I've missed 2 in a row, I shouldn't take this. Like, no, you got to keep playing. You got to keep playing, because the second you start thinking and stop playing, the advantage is gone and you're doomed.
And I think part of that point too is, and we've seen it through the early part of the year, this team has played with a lot more pace, it feels like, throughout the course of the year. And I think some of the numbers have borne that out based on what this team has done from a pace standpoint, which allows these guys to not have to think, because you're getting up and down and transition more. And I think one of the fun things I've seen so far this year, especially, a little bit earlier on, was Luka Doncic getting up and down in transition, not only knocking down catch and shoot threes from time to time now, but my man's hitting transition threes at this point as well. Kyrie has always been able to have the capabilities of doing that. But when you got Luka running down the floor and knocking down threes in transition, then it becomes, oh my gosh, what do we do? Because if he's going to knock down threes in transition, knock them down in half court, now he's got the nerve to hit them in catch and shoot opportunities as well. What do we do with him? Because now he's become a decent enough free throw shooter that if you foul him, he's going to punish you at the free throw line. So it just creates a lot of different dilemmas. But I think part of that is the transition game that this team is engaged in a lot more, it feels like, this year, that maybe has contributed to the, the lessening of the amount of shot clock going down to the wire before, generating offense to be able to bail, possessions out.
Yeah, and sometimes those are like he's hitting some pull-up threes too. Like he's bringing the ball down the floor
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit in transition, but a lot of his best looks in transition have come because Kyrie or Tim or Josh or Exum or Derrick Jones or even Grant Williams, like just somebody else on the team is pushing it, and that stems from somebody else getting the rebound and then somebody else having the confidence to dribble ahead and also the
Mm-hmm.
freedom from the coaching staff. I mean, J-Kid wants these guys to get it up the floor as soon as possible. And if nothing is there, oh, hey, here comes Luka. Now let's get into our offense. But a lot of the times, if you're Josh Green and Kyrie Irving, y'all are screaming down the floor. Everyone is
Mm-hmm.
busting their butt to get back to keep you from humiliating them with some like highlight reel dunk. And then all of a sudden, Luka can just trot down into a wide open three. It's like the only time all game that the defense is not going to be completely keyed in on where he is on the floor because they're paying attention to somebody else. So I'm glad that he's taking advantage of those opportunities. The most famous one I think was he hit that like Kyrie hit the three and then Luka hit the three against Orlando whenever the Mavs made that comeback and had the win.
Mm-hmm.
Like that started because Kyrie was the one that came away with the ball and was racing down the floor. And then all of a sudden Luka's
Uh-huh.
by himself on the wing and he had time to like stop, catch, get his balance right, stare down and fire away. Like he's wide open in that situation because everybody's backtracking. But the Mavs have had this, and some of this is by design. Some of it is by personnel, some of it is coaching decisions, but whatever. Like the last few years, the Mavs have been this team where whether it's a turnover or a defensive rebound, stop, find Luka. All right, Dorian, corner. Reggie, corner. Everybody get in position. Are you good
Yeah.
now? Okay. And there's like 15 seconds left in the shot clock. And I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
you had a steal, but it took you 10 seconds just to get into set, So like
Yeah.
they're not doing that anymore. They're just going out and playing, and sometimes that's gonna be a little weird. Like we saw in Utah, there was that much maligned Josh Green drive to the basket that ended up going very, very poorly. But like you're gonna make some mistakes whenever you're playing fast and free like that. It's gonna be a little wild at times. There's
Yeah.
gonna be some silly choices made, but like that's what everyone is finding their limits, right? And if that's gonna open
Mm-hmm.
up easier looks for Luka and easier looks for everybody else, then hey, that is definitely a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
But before I turn my attention to the defense here for a few minutes, I mean, we started to talk about the two of them, but Luka and Kyrie, I mean, the offensive music that these two make together and the amount of creativity that the two of them put into their offensive game, they're the best backcourt duo in the league. I'm hard pressed to find another duo. You can find single individual players like Tyrese Halliburton's been fantastic this year. Like there's been single guys that have been fantastic for their backcourts, but I can't find a better backcourt duo in the league right now with the versatility that the two of them bring and how much better their teammates become because of what they're able to do from offensive possession to possession and the amount of pressure that they put on defenses based off of the versatility of their offensive games. Like they are just so fun to watch together. I'm just trying to figure out what more is there for the two of them to be able to figure out based off of what their capabilities are to make this offense even that much more potent at this point.
I mean, they're very complimentary too. Luka, for the most part, is going to need a screen in order to get past his man. Like there's some guys that he can just bully his way through. There are some guys
Mm-hmm.
like bigs, especially he can get off balance and then go past. But for the most part, he needs a screen. Kyrie doesn't. His first step is quick enough. He's explosive enough. He's fast enough to get around a guy in isolation. And so you can run this pick and roll with Luka. And if nothing is there, hey, swing it over to Kyrie, who's like got all sorts of space to work one on one against probably the other team's second or third best defender at that point, and then he's going to cook them, and vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. Kyrie can try an ISO, and if nothing is there, hey, I'll kick it out to Luka, pick and roll, boom, we're good. And those two styles really complement each other very well. There's not many redundancies with what they like to do on the court. There's also not many there's not many players, like individual players, that can guard both of them, right? And there's certainly, I guess, like Memphis kind of came close actually with Marcus Smart and Vince Williams Jr. Like both of those guys, I would say, could probably guard Luka. I'm not sure that Vince Williams Jr. can do a great job against Kyrie, but he can bother Luka, especially if Luka was hobbled. like he was last night. There's
And one of
not
those
many
guys is a
teams.
former defensive player of the year. So
Yeah,
that's
well,
the
yeah,
kind of
Smart is
caliber we're
incredible.
talking
Yeah.
about in terms of the guys that could potentially guard Luka a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, these are like the best, Vince Williams Jr. obviously is a young player, but like these are some of the best players in the NBA defensively
Yes.
that I'm talking about. And those guys pretty much and like for as good a job as they did, both guys scored 30 last night. Like, and it was an off night for Luka. Um, there aren't many teams that have personnel that can match them, and that can match up well with them and really cause them problems. If I try and think really hard, like the teams that give Luka the biggest problems are teams that like put all 5 eyes on him at all times, in which case
Mhm.
Kyrie is going to destroy them away from the ball. Hence what we saw against the Timberwolves,
Mhm.
And so those two are just so hard to guard. Impossible to guard individually and as a tandem. And I guess how much better they can get would be like if there was some, I've tried to think of like what is the ideal sidekick for Luca. I guess it's different now that you have Kyrie. I guess the one thing that would be really, really cool is if they had some sort of player that could punish switches, that
Mm.
you could run pick and roll with. But that's like that would just be a really cool luxury to have. I don't think that's necessarily needed for this thing to reach its potential offensively. I think
Mhm.
any improvements they can make would need to be defensively. I mean, they have the offensive goods this is speed. They have the offensive goods to be one of the best teams in the NBA.
Yeah.
If their defense can be not bottom 10.
And that's where we get to next. I like what you did there. That was good. I like what you did there because that's been the question that we've had all season long for this team is could they find a way to somehow be average defensively? I'm not saying I need you to be top 5, top 10. Can you hit me around 15 to 17? Because I know offensively you're going to score a ton every single night and outscore a lot of teams. But can you find me a way to get stops in the last 4 minutes of games and at least not let teams blow you out from a defensive standpoint? Because over the last couple of weeks, prior to the Memphis game, this is a team over the last couple of weeks has been top 5, top 6 team in defensive rating. They're stealing the ball at a higher rate, deflections. Like they're doing some of the things to help them get out in transition that I think has helped some of their play style over the last several weeks. That's contributed to, some of the defense that we're seeing. But the question being for a guy like Grant Williams, for example, up and down season for him, first 7-8 games, knocking down threes at a 50% clip, providing the kind of defense that we thought playing, multiple, defensive positions and just really kind of fall off, since then. What sense do you get that you can feel like that he, along with someone like Josh Green and others, can really kind of find that defense based off of what we think or we thought they were going to be bringing into the season with?
Yeah, with Grant, it's interesting because, since the like, I don't know how you would classify or characterize Derrick Jones and Dante Exum other than like revelation. I mean, I don't think it
Yeah.
was expected for them to be like this. So you have one of them on the floor, and let's go with their first starting lineup, right? Like you got Derrick Jones and Grant Williams. So Jones quickly established himself, in my opinion, as the best point of attack defender on this team. So he's going to be
Mhm.
guarding the 1, right? Now, that means that Grant Williams probably going to have to guard the most dynamic wing. You're not going to put Luka or Kyrie on them, and there are a lot of 3s or like small 4s or 2s, like let's Phoenix, for example. If you put Derrick Jones on KD, that is Grant guarding Booker. If you put Derrick Jones on Booker, is Grant guarding KD. Like that's a really tough matchup, like physically,
Right.
for him in terms of quickness and stuff. And so, I think trying to find like a role for Grant defensively in this system, I mean, honestly, it's proven to be a challenge. I feel like he's done well, like occupying space and not getting like bullied by bigger players, whether he's
Mhm.
playing 4 against bigger guys or 5 against the biggest guys. But where the weaknesses spring up is like, okay, if Grant Williams is playing 5, who is playing 4 for you, and how are you getting a rebound? Grant, I gotta say, man, I'm like a very old school. I watch every player to see if they box out kind of guy. And Grant is a great box out guy, but he's giving up 6 inches to some of these centers. And so even if he
Sure.
boxes them out, they can still reach over him unless he gets help from other guys. And that collective want to sometimes isn't there for the Mavs. And so, hence why Lively is so important, because he's 7'2", so he's got the advantage over most of these players. But it's tough. I think Josh has been pretty energetic on defense. And then since coming back from injury, he's been a big, whether he's getting the steal or somebody else getting a steal, he's getting out and running, which is really good. He's turning defense and offense really well. But where he still struggles, I think, is navigating screens. Derrick Jones is unbelievable at avoiding screens. One of the best players that I've seen in my time with the Mavs. He's incredible. Josh still has a little bit of trouble with that. And then also weak side has the tendency, I think, to sag off a little too far and kind of lose a shooter a little bit. Those are minor things that can make a big, big, big difference to a team's defense that I think a lot of the players need to kind of figure out. But they have been better over the last couple weeks. Some of that is strength of schedule. Some of that is systematic. They're trying to force turnovers more. And looking back to the game against the Grizzlies opened it up in the second quarter and went up 20 or whatever it was. They had 1 turnover in the second quarter. They had 5 turnovers on their first 7 possessions in the fourth quarter, and the Mavs came back and made it.
That's right.
It was a Kyrie Irving 80% of the way down 3-pointer to make it a 7-point game or something, and it spun out and they ended up losing, obviously. But they just didn't force any turnovers. They didn't force any mistakes, and they got cooked. But when you take chances, sometimes you are going to get beat. But also when you take chances, sometimes you're going to get a lot of steals. You're going to get a lot of dunks. And I would rather them play too aggressively and try and do that than do what they were doing earlier in the season, which is just play very passively and just try not to make mistakes and dare your opponents to miss. I feel like there's too much skill in the NBA. There's too much shooting. There's just too many good players to do that. I think you have to try and force them to make mistakes to kind of compensate for your size issues or for your speed issues or whatever the case is. So I like what they're doing lately, but they have got to still get better at it.
Yeah, if you're going to try to compensate for a lack of size, you've got to get into passing lanes, try to create disruption, and try to be able to force the issue from a turnover standpoint. When you were talking about that, it made me think of the Portland Trailblazers games that they had in the sweep of the 2 games in Dallas, where I think one of the games they forced 22 or 23 turnovers on Portland in one of the games, and you just saw just the amount of havoc that they caused, being able to get up and down and transition, but forcing the issue where Portland really couldn't get into any kind of rhythm. To the other point of, strength of schedule a little bit has helped them, throughout some of the early portions of the year, which made the Minnesota win so intriguing because you beat record-wise the best team in the West, and you were able to do it with Luka and Kyrie doing their thing, especially Kyrie doing it, down the stretch. And then you had the letdown against Memphis. Then it kind of just shakes back your thought. Well, okay, now wait a minute. I just saw what this team could be versus some of the best in the NBA. And then a team without John Moran and Jaren Jackson don't bring the energy and they lose by 17 at home. And oh, by the way, you're about to welcome in a guy in Jalen Brunson for the first time playing in an opposite uniform and what the emotion of that is going to bring, at the AAC. And then you get Zion Williamson in the next couple of games, 7-game homestand. I'm just at a point where I'm ready to see what this team looks like from a fully healthy standpoint, which we haven't seen throughout the majority of the year. But then once they do, what does that look like, and how does that match up against, the Minnesotas, the Oklahoma Cities? If we want to look in the East with the Philadelphias and the Bostons, am I going to consider them, even the Clippers who have been playing really well as of late as well, am I going to be able to consider them one of the 6 best teams to where I could see them being in a top 4 scenario by the time we get to the playoffs in April?
Yeah, they're going to have to earn it because their schedule over the next month is, it is serious.
It gets tough. Yeah.
Now, currently I forget what it is exactly. I think they're 6-12, I want to say, against teams that are 500 or better, which is pretty significantly losing. You need to be much closer to 500 if you want to be a top 4 seed. Potentially even above 500 against those teams in order to be a top 4 seed. Now, many of those losses have pretty reasonable asterisks next to them. No Luka, no Kyrie, sometimes no both. in some cases. But yeah, I mean, we need to see them play well against those better teams. Some of them are coming up, like you said. New Orleans is absolutely cooking right now. The Knicks
Mm-hmm.
undefeated since getting OG. On the other side of that, pretty soon you got the Celtics coming up. You got to go. You got to play at Golden State, at the Lakers. Let's see if Draymond is
Mm-hmm.
back for the Warriors and the Lakers. I don't even know what's going to be happening with them, but like, it's a bunch of tough games with a bunch of players. With like the Lakers have AD. The Celtics have KP and Al Horford. Like, there's teams with size that are coming up. Pelicans, obviously, Jonas and Zion. There's teams with size, so you hope that Lively's healthy and back by then. If not, hey, someone's going to have to step up and guard Zion. Someone's got to step
Yep.
up and guard Jonas Valanciunas. No Maxey, no Lively. It's pretty tough. You're going to be at a size disadvantage. Even against most small teams, you're going to be at a size disadvantage almost every single night. And the way that you win, especially against good teams, if you're the smaller team, is by outworking them, out hustling them. The Wolves had a gazillion second chance points in that game, but the Mavs had more second chance points than the team with 2 7-footers on the floor at all times.
Mm-hmm.
They just outworked them. They out hustled them. Dwight Powell drew 8 fouls on those guys and got them all in foul trouble. Like, that's what you have to do. You cannot maybe take your foot off the gas pedal a little bit, the way that Kyrie said after the Grizzlies game. Like, you have to play hard every single night because you're smaller than the other guys. The other guys are maybe faster than you, maybe stronger than you, definitely taller than you. If you don't play harder than them, they are going to win. It doesn't matter how skilled, how injured they are, or whatever. They are going to beat you. So that's kind of the thing. Now, they could certainly afford to add more skill too. I think that would help them against some of these better teams, and I'm sure they're trying to figure that out over the
Sure.
next 4 or 5 weeks. But that's for them. That's for Nico and those guys to figure out. The thing that the players and that J Kid and that the players can figure out is like, okay, how do we match or one up the other team's level of hustle, level of effort, level of want to every single night? Because we're seeing the Mavs play faster than almost every team they go up against. But can they
Mm-hmm.
play harder and faster than them? That is how you win a series and win a championship.
It's going to be fascinating to watch this team as we are about to the halfway point of the regular season. From a games perspective, we know that the All-Star break is the quote-unquote halfway point, but we're like 50 some odd games, and by the time we get to the All-Star break, it's one of the funniest things about the NBA is that when we get to the halfway point of the season, we're nowhere near the All-Star break, and then when we get to the All-Star break, we're about 52 games into the season. Like, okay, all right, we get it.
Yeah, you already have
We
some
just wanted
teams
a
sitting
little
on
bit
like
of a break
40
by the time
wins
we-
by the All-Star break, and you're like, what?
It just
Halfway point?
that's like, how did we
We got like 5 home games left all season.
That's right. That's right. It's a sprint to the finish after the All-Star break because it's late February by the time the NBA season resumes, because in fact the break this year is February 15th, 14th, 15th. The Mavs won't get back on the floor until February 22nd. So we're basically at the end of February by the time they get back on the floor post All-Star break, which by that time it's, like I said, a sprint to the finish for the rest of the regular season from there.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, it's only a month and a half after the All-Star break. And again, I mean, literally, like, the Lakers and Warriors, I think, are currently below 500, but I don't think anybody views them as like losing teams. The Mavs do not play a losing team until February 10th or February 12th or something. They play the
Wow.
Wizards and the Spurs right before the All-Star break. That's it. Like, the next month is playoff team every single night. So like, you better bring
Yeah.
it. If that might not be the sprint, but that is a heck of a marathon.
Yeah, for sure. Bobby, tell the folks so they can find you, what you got going on, man.
At Mavs Studio 41 on Twitter and Instagram. Follow all the stuff that we're doing in Studio 41. As I understand it, we got a podcast coming out. Devin Harris interviewing Derrick Jones Jr. How about that? So that'll be on the Mavs YouTube channel here at some point soon. Subscribe to the Dallas Mavericks on YouTube. You can catch all of the podcasts that we do in the studio, video edits, breakdowns, things like that. And yeah, we're just trucking away, man. Our office was closed for 3 weeks for some construction, but we're back in there this week. So I'm going to try streaming again in the second half of the season. So we'll hopefully be able to bring that back too.
Well, shout out to Isaac Harris. Obviously, the work that you're doing over there. Y'all got a terrific team over there. Y'all was able to swipe Isaac Harris over there, and he's out there doing his thing as well. So y'all do a terrific job covering this team. So a lot of of fun going forward watching this team. I appreciate you hanging out with me here on the show today, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Kevin.
That's it for this of Inside the Mavs. Really appreciate Bobby Karalla of Mavs.com, digital content manager, and of Studio 41 for hanging out with me today on the show. You can check and be sure to download and subscribe to Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. Look out for our next episode as Jake Sports is going to be joining me, talking a little NBA trade deadline for your Mavericks and see what he's hearing across the league about what the Mavericks may be doing. So make sure you're looking out for that on our next one here on Inside the Mavs. Again, my name is Kevin Gray, Mavs pre and post host for 97.1 The Freak. I'll talk to you next time. Peace.